Hello everyone, Mason here. How are you doing? It's time for a book review. This time I'm talking about Target by Simon Kernick. Viewer discretion is advised because, to be honest, there's some foul language in this review. Failed thriller writer Rob Fallon is on a night out when he bumps into his best friend's ex-girlfriend Jenny. There's a spark between them, and eventually they decide to go back to Jenny's flat. But before they can get around to doing the horizontal tango, Rob needs the little boy's room. Sexy Rob, that'll do it. Two men break into Jenny's apartment and begin kidnapping her. Rob barely escapes with his life, but when he goes to the police, they don't believe anything has happened, and all the evidence contradicts it. Can Rob find out what's happened to Jenny and what these thugs want with a normal girl like her before they both end up dead? Ah, this book. What a wonderfully awful experience it was. To tell you the truth, it's not bad. I did enjoy it. It's just one of those experiences, like when you watch a movie that's so bad that it kind of breaks the scale and ends up being enjoyable because you spend the entire time laughing at how unbelievably bad it is. Everything about Target is just so thrillery. We get a few different points of view, one of which is Tina Boyd, a detective who is literally Dylan Justice. It's like Simon Kernick looked up detective on TV tropes and thought it was an instruction manual. The plot is unbelievable, but it's actually kind of enjoyable in a mindlessly, robotically stuffing popcorn in your mouth while you're watching an action movie sort of way. I feel bad for saying this, it's not the sort of thing that I usually say, but I think that you can tell Target is written by a man. It's the sort of book that you would buy for your dad or your uncle if he's the kind of guy that's not an avid reader, but every now and again he'll pick up some sort of pulpy action thriller. I can definitely see this as a baking in the sun, lounging by the pool holiday read. The chain of events that unfold are comical, and I don't think they're supposed to be. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe Simon Kernick was sitting, typing this up, giggling manically to himself, but I don't think he was. I think he thought he was writing some sort of gritty, action-packed, race-against-time thriller, and it doesn't work on that level in my opinion. The main character, Rob, continuously gets out of situations he just shouldn't survive. He's dealing with professional criminals, the kind of people that have evaded the police for years and years, and yet he escapes time and time again. There are a few twists and turns, but most of them are eye-rollingly bad. One of them is a massive plot hole that I just can't figure out. When we eventually get the explanation of why everything is happening, it's laughably mundane. The long and short of it is this: I'm not recommending this book, and in truth, that was never the intention of this video. I just really wanted to talk about it. However, I didn't hate it. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, and if you were looking for something easy to read that you don't need to pay too much attention to, that you can laugh at on the plane or on holiday, this might not be a bad choice. Right, for those of you who will never go and read Target, but want to hear me rip apart the plot, stick with me, because we're going to get into spoilers. If this has somehow made you want to go and read Target and you don't want spoilers, we'll say goodbye now. Thanks ever so much for spending time with me. Could you hit the like button on the way out? Cheers, mate. Alright, if you're still here, let's start where we left off, because the ridiculousness begins almost immediately and there's a lot to unpack. Before he can take Jenny to bed, our main man Rob needs to relieve himself. As he does so, he hears the sound of 2 men enter Jenny's apartment, attack her and render her unconscious. Naturally, he springs into action, throws himself at the thugs and tries to help Jenny out. Right? Wrong! What he actually does is climb inside the bathtub and hide behind the shower curtain. Well, brave. However, this spectacular hiding place doesn't work very well for some reason. One of the kidnappers, an Irish guy that Simon Kernick really wants us to know has had plastic surgery and will continuously describe as having orb-like eyes throughout the story, comes into the bathroom and uses it because he's never heard of leaving DNA behind. The highly observant kidnapper doesn't notice Rob drunkenly quivering behind the shower curtain as 2 men attempt to load the woman he was about to go to bed with inside a trolley. They do notice his discarded jacket on the bedroom floor though. As the Irish guy approaches where Rob is hiding, he leaps out using a heavy soap dish shaped like a fish as a weapon, clobbering the Irish guy in the face, leaping over a coffee table and making his escape, out the door and dashing down the stairwell. The Irish guy keeps up with Rob though, and they end up having a fight in an underground car park. Rob is about to die, but a car enters and the Irish guy runs off back into the building. Naturally, Rob goes straight to the police station, right? Wrong! What he actually does is run through the streets until he finds a back alley where he throws up and then hides in a wheelie bin. There's a sketchy moment where Rob is almost caught because the kidnappers are driving around the area looking for him. The Irish guy even looks in the alley where Rob is, doesn't notice the puke, doesn't look in the wheelie bin, gets back in his car and drives off. Rob falls asleep in the wheelie bin for 2 hours. When he wakes up, he finally locates his conscience and goes to the police station, but they don't believe him because he smells bad and he's drunk. Eventually, he gets to talk to Tina Boyd, the detective, who, after some convincing, accompanies him back to Jenny's apartment block. The doorman says that he's never seen Rob before and claims that Jenny is on holiday. He even shows Tina security footage of people entering and leaving the lobby, and Rob and Jenny aren't there. On top of that, Jenny's flat shows no sign that a struggle ever happened. At this point, Tina thinks that Rob is talking bollocks, but because he's so insistent, she agrees to at least look into the possibility that the security footage has been tampered with, after which she tells him to go home and that she'll call him. The next day, Rob claims to be so worried about Jenny, so worried that he actually finds time to smoke a spliff with his not-quite friend Ramon. He leaves to get a beer, and whilst he's in the kitchen, disaster strikes again. When he re-enters the living room, he finds that Ramon is now dead, shot through the eye by the Irish kidnapper, which Rob didn't hear because the gun had a silencer, which, makes the gun actually silent. Then, Irish kidnapper guy forces Rob to drink a load of whiskey, which makes him instantly drunk, then call Tina to tell her that he made the whole thing up. This annoys Tina at first, but then she feels confused because not long afterwards she finds out that the security footage has indeed been tampered with. Rob is knocked out, and when he wakes up, Ramon's body is gone, all trace that he was ever there removed. He manages to go on a sneaky walk and call Tina to tell her that the kidnappers got to him, but fails to mention his now dead former not quite friend Ramon, for reasons. Tina now believes him, but her superiors don't, and they won't give her the time and resources she needs to work the case. So what does Tina do? Well, obviously, as an actual detective, she recruits the civilian she doesn't even know to work the case with her. She tells Rob she thinks that Jenny's dad is hiding something, and instructs him to get over to the house where he lives so that he can trespass on private property and perform illegal surveillance without a warrant to gather intel. At this point, I feel the need to pause to say, what? I don't believe for a second that the police wouldn't be taking the report of a kidnap seriously, whether or not Rob smelt bad or was drunk at the time, especially when they can't get in touch with the person he's claiming has been kidnapped, even if her dad says she's on holiday. It's completely unbelievable to me that Tina would be the only one taking the whole thing seriously, and then she would endanger Rob's life, Jenny's life, and her job by recruiting Rob and risking him getting caught. This isn't even the most unbelievable part. Let's get back to it. Rob isn't trained as a surveillance operative, so he has no idea how to enter the property. The wall is too high to climb, so in the end he decides to do a belly crawl underneath the garden hedge. Once inside, he conspicuously blunders round taking pictures until, shock horror, he's caught by Jenny's dad. He tries to get Rob inside for a quick chat, but mouths the word "run" because the kidnappers are there. London kidnapper starts to chase Rob, who doesn't have time to belly crawl underneath the garden hedge this time, so instead dodges the hammer blows that are being thrown by London kidnapper and runs, Wile E. Coyote style, through the garden hedge instead. This works and he manages to make his escape. After that, Rob goes into hiding, staying at some rundown hotel, and we switch to Tina's point of view where we get more illegal activity. Remember the doorman from Jenny's apartment complex? Well, Tina's convinced he's the one that tampered with the security footage, so she breaks into his apartment while he's sleeping and plants listening devices, once again without a warrant to speak of. She then returns to her car where she calls Rob, instructing him to call the doorman, tell him that he's onto him and threaten to go to the police. The doorman falls for this, panics, calls the kidnappers and tells them that he's not happy. Tina settles down, staking out the apartment complex, and then falls asleep, only waking up when a car arrives. She manages to snap a picture of the Irish kidnapper as he's entering the doorman's building. She sends this picture to her friend Mike, who recognises the kidnapper as a man named Hook, a very dangerous, wanted man. But before Mike can relay this information to Tina, disaster strikes once again. I'm not sure why Tina doesn't try to intercept the kidnappers here, but she doesn't. Hook kills the doorman and Tina watches the car drive away, but doesn't realise that Hook has circled round. He gets in the car, points the gun at her and tells her to drive. There's some stuff about Hook and Tina driving. Hook makes a lot of threats and comes across as a general creepy weirdo. There's also some stuff about Mike worrying about Tina because he can't get in touch with her. But let's get back to Rob for a bit, because this is where it gets really ridiculous. Deciding he needs help, Rob goes to a man named Maxwell, an ex-thug whose memoirs Rob is writing. He figures Maxwell's done some dangerous criminal stuff and will surely be able to help, but Maxwell doesn't want to get involved. He does, however, offer Rob a place to stay, which he gladly accepts and gets some much needed rest, but when he wakes up, the kidnappers are there. Hook forces Rob and Maxwell into Maxwell's country garden and makes them dig their own graves. Maxwell is shot and Rob is about to go the same way, but a car turns up. This offers a distraction and Rob throws his shovel at Hook's head, which I couldn't help laughing at. After that, Rob runs off into the woods. After lots of sprinting through the woods in the pouring rain, eventually Rob makes it to a country lane where there's a pub. That could offer some safety. He's about to make it through the door when a man exits and is shot in the head by Hook, who's in hot pursuit. Oh no, Rob's gonna get killed here, right? Wrong. It turns out that Maxwell was a confidential informant for Tina's friend Mike, and that's who showed up in their car, allowing Rob to make his escape. As Hook is about to shoot Rob, Mike comes barreling down the country lane, but because the road is wet, he can't stop in time and he hits Rob with his fucking car. Rob goes flying through the air. Hook shoots at Mike, cracking the windscreen. Mike hits a tree. Hook escapes and Rob is sent to hospital. This is one of my favourite parts. Mike and his partner need to leave this now active crime scene, but as Mike's partner points out, they don't have any transport. Mike goes over to his wrecked car, and his partner points out that they can't see a thing because of the cracked windscreen. Mike smashes the windscreen and says, "We can now," before getting in and driving off. At the hospital, Rob is understandably feeling quite beaten up at this point. He doesn't have an armed guard because for some reason the police don't think he's in danger anymore. He leaves the room for some reason, I can't remember why, and spots Hook talking to some orderlies. Rob starts running. Hook gives chase, starts unloading bullets right then and there in the hospital, but despite being, amongst other things, a contract killer, he misses every shot. They run past some doctors who are wheeling a patient on a gurney, and they hide behind the patient. Eventually, Rob makes it to a room where he hides under the bed. A man shows up, but it's not Hook, it's Mike. Along with his partner, Mike takes Rob back to his hospital room, where he interviews him. It turns out Rob has a GPS tracker on his phone, which is why the kidnappers knew where he was. After a while, Rob's best friend and Jenny's ex-boyfriend, Dom, shows up and offers Rob a place to stay. Rob agrees, is discharged, and goes back to Dom's house with him. Whilst he's there, Rob has a much needed catch up with Dom, but realises Dom has information he shouldn't have, and figures that he's actually in on the kidnapping. Is this a paranoid delusion? No, Dom is actually in on the kidnapping and smashes Rob over the head with a bottle before calling Hook. There's this bullshit scene where Kernick tries to manufacture some tension, but it's really just Mike and his team on the phone, as they try to track Hook using the AMPR system. Doesn't work though, they lose track of him. Hook turns up at Dom's house where he kills Dom and then Rob. This makes no sense to me whatsoever, because Rob has been narrating his parts in first person past tense. Now if this was a fantasy story, I'd cut Kernick some slack and say that Rob is maybe just narrating this from beyond the grave, from some sort of afterlife. It's not though, it's a thriller, and let's face it, Kernick just didn't clock the fact that it makes no sense for Rob to be narrating this story from the future if he dies during the course of the fucking story. It makes no sense whatsoever. After that, we're on the home stretch, and it's time for some revelations. It turns out the reason Jenny was kidnapped was to get to her dad, who owns a company that deals with some dangerous toxic gases. The man Hook works for needed Jenny's dad to place a large order for mustard gas, so that Hook, along with his IRA connections, could rig up this mustard gas bomb lorry terrorist attack. There's this convoluted explanation of how the bomb is going to be detonated, because apparently mustard gas isn't dangerous when it's ignited. The long and short of it is, they're planning to take it into London and set it off so they can gas as many people as possible. Mike is horrified and desperately tries to search for where they're holding the lorry. Tina, meanwhile, is being held in a large country barn where they're keeping the lorry. She doesn't know that yet because she's upstairs. Hook is tormenting her by showing her what he's done to Jenny. He then shoots Jenny in the head and Tina in the foot so she can't escape, whilst he leaves to go do some business. Tina does manage to escape though. She picks the lock using a lockpick which she kept in her sock, which Hook didn't notice. She manages to make it down into the main part of the barn, and while these career criminals that are assembling a bomb sneak off for a fag, she manages to sneak into the lorry and hide under a blanket. Whilst she's hiding, Tina realises that one of the bomb makers has left his phone in the lorry. She uses it to fire off a text to Mike to tell him to track where she is before deleting the message so that the bomb maker doesn't realise she's used his phone. Once the lorry sets off, it doesn't take long for Mike to catch up with it, and there's a bit of a chase. Tina, not realising that there's a giant mustard gas bomb in the back of the lorry, attacks the driver, who swerves off the road. Once it's stationary, Mike climbs in and struggles with the passenger. Tina joins in, but the driver, who's determined to get the job done, pushes all three of them out onto the road. What the driver doesn't realise is there's a pressure pad in his seat designed to detonate the bomb if he leaves the lorry, so even if he gets pulled over and arrested, the bomb will still go off. When he leans over to shut the door, it triggers the pressure pad and the bomb goes off. Mustard gas is spilling everywhere. Mike and Tina just about make a narrow escape. Meanwhile, back at the barn, Hook is mad. He's realised that Tina has escaped, but he's got bigger problems. He's surrounded by the police. He sets the barn on fire and the SWAT team enters. In the blaze, they shoot Hook and rescue Jenny, who it turns out isn't dead despite being shot in the head. They get the poor girl out of there and into an ambulance. Everything ends on a positive note. Right? Wrong. Get ready for this one. It turns out that the woman in the ambulance isn't Jenny, it's Hook. Yeah, that's right, it's Hook, wearing a wig made out of Jenny's hair that he hastily fashioned after scalping her. Yeah, I said that right. He fashions a wig out of her hair after scalping her, and then a member of a SWAT team carries him out of the burning barn and doesn't notice that it's not a woman. After that, everything just sort of wraps up. With the terrorist attack averted, they eventually track Hook down and there's a chase scene through a park where he uses a kid as a hostage to escape Mike. However, Tina hits him with the car and he dies. Well, with all of that action-packed stuff, you'd imagine that the reason behind the attempted terrorist attack would be exciting, right? Well, you'd be wrong. The plan was to set the bomb off in an area with lots of large retail stores in an attempt to crash the stock market, which, for convoluted reasons, would have led to the unseen villain of the story making lots of money. However, it would have been pointless because just a few days afterwards, the financial crash happens and the recession begins. Right, well, is anybody still here? If you are, well done, you deserve a medal because that took me a lot longer than intended. The plan was to just tell you about all the ridiculous stuff, but it turns out that there's a metric shit ton of ridiculous contained within this plot, and it took me a lot longer than I thought it was going to. I think it's safe to say that I'm not going to pick up anything else by Simon Kernick. As mindlessly enjoyable as it was at the time, the more I think about it, the more ridiculous I find it. My question for anyone who's actually made it to this point is this. Name the book with the most ridiculous plot you've ever read. I hope you've enjoyed this review. If you have, the like and subscribe buttons are just sitting there, waiting to be pressed. Now press them, or else. Or else what? You don't want to find out, mate. If you want to get in touch, say hi and have a chat. You know where the comment section is, and the link to my Twitter is in the description. Thanks ever so much for spending time with me today, guys. Until next time, take care. For now, I'm off, and you should have a good one.